G'day guys, Jake here. Today we're going to be running through how to create a Windows Server 2019 virtual machine running on Microsoft Azure. So this is part of a series of Azure videos which will be linked in the description below. If you want to see more, go down there, like and subscribe to see the videos so you get notified when they come out. But anyway, so what we're going to do is at the moment, if we see here, we've got our virtual machines in our menu. If I go to there, we're actually not going to have any virtual machines. So there's none in here. So pretty much to add a new one, we can go create virtual machine or add up here, or you can also add it from a blank resource. So if we go to create a new resource up in that menu, you've got a few options for a just default, but we can go custom by going to compute and virtual machines. From here, you select your subscription, your resource group. I'm not going to have any resource groups, so I'm going to create a new one. And just call it videos 1, and the virtual machine name is VM SVR 2019 01. Select your region. I'm going to put it in Australia Southeast because that's close to me. If you need infrastructure availability, select it there. Select your operating system. So I'm going to select Server 2019. I've got too many characters. 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12, 13. Alright, we'll just take that out. There we go. I'll just call it like that, 1901. Alright, so we can only have 15 letters in the virtual machine name. Down here you can select the size. Your subscription doesn't allow for it. Alright, let's try changing the location. Alright, so apparently I can only put things in the US because I've got this sort of subscription. Here you can change the size of your virtual machine, so that's how many virtual CPUs, how much RAM of memory and default storage. You can see that by, if you want to compare them all, the easiest way is to go to the Azure pricing calculator here and just select your stuff over there. I'll run through a video of how to use that Azure pricing calculator at some point as well, so then you get a bit of an in-depth run through. Anyway, admin account. We're going to call that, I'm just going to get a notepad so I've got this saved. So on the other screen I've got a notepad, and we're going to call it, so we're going to give the username of here's Jake and admin, the password. Down there it should give you all ticks if it's all right and meets the requirements. And then if we want any inbound port rules, so we're going to say allow RDP because you're going to need to get into the server somehow. And do you want to save some money? If you already have your Windows Server license, you can say yes and confirm and then put in your stuff and use Azure Hybrid benefits, but we don't have that and we're just testing stuff out. So then you can select your operating system disk type. These disk types do have different prices for the different types. So if you use a premium, it's going to cost more. Use a standard SSD, it's going to cost a little bit less. Standard HDD is going to cost a bit less too. We're just going to use a standard SSD because this is only for testing anyway. And do you want a data disk, which I don't. And then if you want to use managed disks or not, I just use managed disks. And then the virtual network, it will create all of the things for your default virtual network out of the box, basically. And then we go next. And now, what things do you want for your security center? So if you want OS diagnostics, we're going to turn them on, and it'll store the diagnostics in a storage account. And if we want to enable auto shutdown, which I don't want to enable auto shutdown, and also if you want to enable automatic backups, which I don't. because I don't care. I'm going to be deleting this. These are things that you do need to consider when actually running this stuff though, when doing it in real life. So if you're creating your virtual machines and going to run your infrastructure on Azure, I recommend putting in a bit more thought than what I have into all these different things. So now, do we want to install any extensions? From here, you can see there's a bunch of products that you can have pre-installed if that's what you want. We're not going to use any, but you know, if this was what you were doing, if you were going to run, I don't know, Kaspersky hybrid cloud on your server anyway, you can just have it pre-installed. And we're going to leave all this blank. And then what generation do you want? So then if you want to tag this resource, so if this can be beneficial for if you've got a lot of different things inside of your Azure subscription, if you put tags on it, it can make it easier to filter things out and know what matches up to each other. But once again, you probably do need to put a bit of thought into that when you're in a production environment, because you just go tagging things randomly and stuff, it makes things hard to find. So now we go review and create. Now it's going to give us a approximately hourly cost. So as we can see, it's going to cost approximately 8 cents an hour. And here's all the settings. If you want, you can download the PowerShell template. So if you want to do this again and again and again, here we go. We can download it or add it to the library, which I'm not actually going to do. So now if we click create, that's going to start creating the virtual machine. And you can see here, it's initializing the template and submitting the thing for deployment. So now it's actually creating the virtual machine. And we can see up here in our notification center that the deployment is in progress. So I'll just stop this for a minute and I'll come back when it's finished. So now we have it. Our deployment is finished and took what, about 5 minutes. So started, finished at 32 past. So yeah, around about 5 minutes. If you want to download the deployment details, you can, but you know, whatever. So we're going to go to the resource and then we're going to jump into it. So now we can see here, you can see some stats. So we can see there's some disk operations and CPU work. So if we click the connect button, what this is going to do is download an RDP file. And we're going to punch in our details that we sent in before. And it's going to remote into the server. So here we go. Now you can see we're getting our remote session into the server. It's connecting into a public IP, which is the public IP of the VM, or of the network card that's attached to it. So now it's going to ask you what you want to do on your network. If you want to allow it to discover PCs and devices, we're going to let it do it. And then it goes, try managing servers with the new admin service. Woohoo! So there we go. Now you can see we have a VM. So let's check out our IP configuration. So you can see we've got an internal network here. We're not actually, our network adapter on the server isn't actually connected to the public IP. This public IP is connected into there through this default gateway here. So you can see in here that we've got one virtual CPU and 3.5 gig of memory. So you can check that by going to here. And performance will show that we've got 3.5 gig of memory. And if I change the, we can't change it to logical processors because there's only one. But we can see here virtual processors. that we've got running. If you want to see a bandwidth test, let's just run a speed test on this baby. Don't worry about that. Internet security is enabled, so if we turn that off, i.e. enhanced security, if we just turn that off, because otherwise we won't be able to run a speed test. And we'll go to speed test. And here we can just run a speed test on Bing. And we have a lot of speed. So there is, what's that, 700-ish megabits down. So I don't know what your speed's like at home, but mine is certainly not that fast. I would really like to be plugged straight into that sort of speed. And what's that, around 130, 140 up. So this server here inside of Azure's US data center is getting to the Bing speed test at 775 megabits down and 147 megabits up, which is really, really fast. So what we're going to do next is we're going to exit all of this, and then we're going to change it so we can only actually remote in from this IP, because at the moment running RDP just open to the internet like that. So at the moment anybody from anywhere in the world can remote into 13.77.205.253 on the default RDP port of 3389 if they have the username and password, which, well, it might be hard to guess. I'm sure somebody can do it, and it is a very common way people get hacked. So locking down this RDP access is essential to keeping your anything secure. Really, open RDP ports are an extremely weak vulnerability and a very common way that people get in and hack things. So to do that, pretty much all we got to do is go to the networking tab inside of your virtual machine. And you can see here our top firewall rule is the priority of 300. So the lower the priority, the higher the firewall rule. So basically what it will happen is it'll check this one first. If it gets a match, it will work. If it doesn't, it'll go to the next. So you can see the last one is deny all inbound. So basically it'll go, all right, is it RDP? Is it this? Is it that? Otherwise deny everything. If you had the deny all inbound as say priority 20, it would go, something would come in and then it would go no. So it just wouldn't work because it's a higher priority. So if we go into here, into the RDP settings, and pretty much what we can do is change the source to an IP address. And if I put my IP address in here, and then hit save, and it's going to update this security rule. Now you can see in your notifications that that security rule has been updated. So I should still have RDP access from here, which I do. But if I actually was on a different network, which I don't have available to me, but if my public IP, which is here, was different, then I would not be able to remote desktop into the server because I would have the wrong IP and the firewall would block me. So I'll just take you through a couple of other things that you can do in here. So from here you can also add another disk. So at the moment you can see that we've got the one managed disk, which is our operating disk of 127 gig. So if I open this here, we should have an operating disk of 126, 127. We also have the temporary storage. It's recommended not to put stuff in this temporary storage because that's just there. I'm not actually sure why they have it there, but you can read the data loss warning. This is a temporary disk. Any data stored in this drive is subject to data loss. So they must just use it for some stuff, but anyway, something that works in there, don't use the disk for storing stuff, because you will lose it. And who likes losing data? Not me. So you can see here, if we wanted to add another data disk, we can just do this here, create a new disk, and we'll go data disk 1. And it says we can't do that. Data disk 1. We see we get the tick, so it's fine. And here you can change the size of it, so we're just going to use a 32 gig one and create that. So what will happen now is it'll create the disk and automatically load it into that virtual machine. You shouldn't have to turn the virtual machine off or anything. It should just be live, like plugging in a SATA disk. You know, you can just hot swap the SATA disks when you're using a physical server. It's basically the same logic. You've just plugged in an extra disk. So now we can see we've successfully created the disk. In here, if I then open my... not there. We'll open this up and we should have another data disk in here. That hasn't showed up. Why not? Change that to read write. Oh, we need to hit save. So we'll save that. So that first part was it creating the disk. Once we hit save, you can see that it's updating the virtual disks, and then it should be attached. There we go. Oh. Drop the connection for a sec. So here we go. Now you can see there is a 32 gig attached disk that's not initialized, so we can just initialize that disk. We'll put it as a GPT partition, and then if we add it as a new volume, it will show up in there. Let's call it the F drive, and we'll call that data. So it'll run a quick format on that disk, and in a second, now we have a data disk. And you can see because we've got read and write access, I can create folders and create files on that disk. There it is. So that's some stuff that you can do with disk. You can just keep adding them too, so you can add them, you can take them out. So if you wanted to remove that disk, you can remove it later on by editing it and stuff. We've also got a bunch of other stuff here. So some other stuff that's useful is you can set up your backup if you want to do that in here by creating a backup job and backup vaults. We can also set up alerts for here. So at the moment we haven't got any, but if you wanted to, you can go in your alert rule, add some conditions and all of that. We don't have that set up. So you should be able to also go down to your overview, and now we can see some more stuff. So you can see here CPU usage. I only open 1 hour because we haven't had this machine going long. So now if you want to turn off the VM, if you turn it off from inside of the host by going like this, let's say I go shut down, that actually doesn't stop the billing. So if you want the billing to stop for your virtual machine, what you want to do is click the stop button here. So the public IP will be lost. Do we want to reserve this IP? You can say yes or no. You can just get a new IP later. I might reserve it though, just for fun. Hit OK. Now it's going to save the public IP address. We're going to get billed for that IP address as well because they bill you for everything on Azure, but it doesn't cost that much. But our from stopping this virtual machine, we will stop getting billed for the virtual machine. We will still get billed for the storage that's attached to the virtual machine, but we won't be billed for the compute hours that are associated with it. So when it's on, you still get billed for like the RAM, CPU usage, and that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's it. That is how to create a VM inside of Azure. So we've just created a Server 2019 virtual machine. Don't forget, like, subscribe to see more videos, and I'll see you in the next one.